Hey everyone. So I'm here today to finally share my thoughts on Mamoru Hosoda's latest animated cinematic venture, Scarlet. I know that I'm a bit late to the party when it comes to discussing this film, but I really wanted to give myself some time so that I can gather my thoughts on this one rather than just rushing into a review like I normally do, because as you could guess from the thumbnail, I did have some very mixed feelings on this one. Now, this is a film that I'd been waiting a long time to finally see because the trailers and posters really seem to stand out to me, and I know that Hosoda is considered one of Japan's biggest animation directors, and I am somewhat familiar with his work. The one film that I know him the most for is Wolf Children, because that's a film that I consider to be a masterpiece. I still get emotional every time I go back and watch Wolf Children. I thought Belle was a beautiful film, even if it's not something that I would normally watch, I still thought it was well made. I have not seen The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, which a lot of people say that's one of his best films. He's also directed a lot of Digimon stuff, but here now we have Scarlet. The premise to this film is sort of based on William Shakespeare's Hamlet. In fact, many of the characters share the same names. It begins in medieval Denmark, where a royal princess named Scarlet witnesses her father dethroned and executed by her uncle Claudius. She grows up plotting her revenge and tries to kill him, but unfortunately, her uncle ends up killing her first. Her soul wakes up in this frightening purgatory world where she meets all kinds of other dead people of all walks of life, from different cultures and different time periods, but apparently people can still die in the afterlife, and when you die in the afterlife, you cease to exist. But then she discovers that her uncle has also died and he is in this purgatory world as well, so she decides to continue her revenge mission to hunt down her uncle in the afterlife. So I do think the story has a lot to offer, and there are times where the visuals do a fantastic job at making this purgatory world look both frightening and even beautiful. I've heard that while they were making this, Hosoda wanted to mix elements of both Eastern and Western animation, and you can definitely see a lot of Disney influence, just like Belle was very Disney inspired. The way that every sequence is framed, like a lot of the dance sequences, are much more akin to Sleeping Beauty rather than your usual anime pop musical. There is a full-blown hula dance scene that looks like it came straight out of Lilo and Stitch, and as completely random as that scene is, I got a real good laugh out of it. A couple of the villains reminded me of like some goofy henchmen that you would see in Disney films like Hunchback of Notre Dame or Beauty and the Beast. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, they have like the big chins and those shit-eating grins on their faces. Like, you can really tell what they were going for. I think it is a unique blend of both East and West, which is something that I would honestly love to see more of. Because these days you see a lot of American artists that take inspiration from like Japanese anime, which I myself as an artist am guilty of. But it's interesting whenever I see like a Japanese anime film that takes inspiration from like American animation. So as you can tell, there are a lot of things that I found enjoyable about this movie. It's not bad, but man, they really made some bizarre choices with this movie, and they're not necessarily bad choices, but they really do take some time to get used to. Okay, so where do I even begin? I guess I first want to talk about the film's mix of both CGI and 2D animation. Now, this can actually work if it is handled well. Like, the last video I did was on All You Need Is Kill, and I respected that film for how it utilized both techniques. But in Scarlet's case, the two styles just do not mesh as well. I think it's because in All You Need Is Kill, both techniques still had a shared color palette, but in Scarlet, the color palettes and even the lighting is constantly clashing with each other, and it does get a bit disorienting at times. Sometimes the facial features don't quite match with the rest of their heads, and I even thought Hosoda's last movie Belle did a much better job at mixing the two styles together. It gets even more confusing in Scarlet when it goes back and forth between 2D and CGI because there are times where characters don't quite look the same as they did just moments ago. For example, there's this one elderly caravan leader in the movie who is missing one of his eyes, and when you see him for the first time, he is mostly CGI. But then when you see him in the very next scene, He's completely animated in 2D, and he doesn't even look like the same character. It literally took me a minute to even recognize him. There's also a couple of scenes where Scarlet confronts these two men who were involved in executing her father, and what kept on distracting me is that both of them looked exactly the same but with different hair and beard colors. It's not that I don't love the art style, in fact, I love how unique it looks, but I just think they could have maybe varied up the designs a bit more without it being too inconsistent. So look, even though some of the decisions with the art and animation were a bit off-putting, I still was able to get used to it and appreciate it for what it was. Though I will say, the film's story structure is something else that I am a bit on the fence about. I do love how it starts out with us getting to know each of Scarlet's family members and what roles each of them play in the story, but once we get into the afterlife is when the film's narrative starts to become kind of muddled. And this is mostly a problem that occurs during the first portion of the movie, but we never really stay focused on one scene for more than a minute or two. The way that some of the scenes are cut makes you feel like you're watching a trailer and not an actual movie. There were times where it was like you blink and you miss something important. Like, she wakes up in this hellscape with all these hands reaching for her, she meets that creepy old lady, and then all of a sudden she's in this desert wasteland beating up soldiers and she's got this makeshift armor, and I'm just thinking to myself, can we please slow down for a minute or two? Like, it would be nice if we could just have some breathing room before we jump into the next action sequence. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love the sword fights and stuff. I especially love the one part where this big guy in armor tries to attack Scarlet, and she kills him by stabbing him in the crotch. But I just don't think they needed to make the film's narrative so complicated because the story is pretty straightforward. But it's just that the way it's structured makes it way more messy and inconsistent than it should be. I also thought that the characters' motivations could have been handled a little better. Of course Scarlet wants to get revenge on her uncle, but for the first half of the movie, that's all that there really is to her character. While traveling through the afterlife, she meets a medical professional from modern-day Japan named Heishidi, and he sort of becomes a shoulder for her to lean on. And I sort of did like his character, but Scarlet's only course of action is just a basic revenge tale. She mostly just spends the first chunk of the movie brooding about her uncle. I mean, yes, she eventually does start to do good things and help people, but when she does, it's just like, finally. I do love the scene where she's talking to the little dead child and she starts to help people. I just wish that we got to see more scenes like that where she's actually trying to be proactive. The scene where she has the vision of the future and you see the crowds of people dancing with that beautiful song that plays, that was like a breath of fresh air among all the suffering you see throughout the movie. As I've said, there is plenty to love about the visuals, the almost photorealistic appearance of the desert wastelands, that huge dragon with all the swords and spears sticking out of it, and my favorite part would have to be the scene where Scarlet is walking up the stairway until she's floating through the sky. The way that that entire scene was framed and scored was definitely the most heartwarming part of the movie for me. The story also does go into a lot of morbid theology about life and death and life after death. I hate to sound like one of those, whoa, that's deep man types, but it makes Scarlet feel relatable because lots of people do wonder about what comes after we die. Death in Scarlet is depicted as a scary thing. The afterlife is not a paradise, it's a hellish wasteland where people die. But it also raises a lot of questions that go unanswered, like, so, when people die in the afterlife, they cease to exist. But then I'm wondering, do people grow old in the afterlife? Do they die of old age? Are they still all going to cease to exist eventually? Do they even have the resources to survive? There's just so many things that I'm left wondering, but that's the thing. It's a film that makes you wonder about the afterlife, and that's something that I love about it. I mean, these days, you see so many stupid fantasy anime about the afterlife where characters just get everything handed to them. But now, here comes Scarlet. Scarlet shows that the concept of an afterlife can be scary. I mean, I think most people in real life would be terrified if this is what the afterlife was like, but at the same time, it's still full of mystery and beauty. So now let's talk about the voice acting. The way that I normally do this is that I give my thoughts on both the Japanese version as well as the English version. The Japanese voice cast consists mostly of professional drama actors, most of whom don't normally do voice work, so unfortunately I didn't recognize too many of the voices in this. However, I think Mana Ashida, who voices Scarlet, did a tremendous job at giving life to the character, especially when she gets to sing. It's a very emotional performance, and she pulls it off really well. Masaki Okada was also good as the voice of Heishiri. His role really helps lighten the mood during the film's darker moments. The rest of the cast all did their best. Again, most of them are known for doing dramas, so you really do feel each of them embodying their characters. Now, with the English dub, look, it's not too terrible. People that know me know that I'm actually pretty forgiving when it comes to dubbing, so it's not like I'm being biased or anything, but I do have a couple of criticisms. Erin Yvette, as the English voice of Scarlet, actually did a near perfect job, but at the same time though, I think the problem is that there's a few moments where the dialogue just doesn't translate very well into English, so some of her deliveries come off a bit awkward. This was especially noticeable during the beginning flashbacks when she's supposed to be a child. But just like her Japanese voice, I still did love it when she gets to sing. Most of the other English voice actors are just alright. Not bad, just alright. The ones that bothered me the most were the villains. I think what really got to me is that most of them just had the same sounding voices. Like, half of them are doing like these gruff idiot Chris Sabat type of voices, and then the other half are doing like these silly Joker conniving type of voices. Though not all of them were terrible. Of course you have Yuri Lowenthal, who is great in everything he's in, so it's nice having him here as well. But the one member of the English cast who I really enjoyed was Juanita Jennings as the Old Crone. Even though it's a fairly small role, she is an experienced actress and she gives her character lots of personality. Her performance reminded me a lot of Linda Young's Genkai voice from Yu Yu Hakusho. In fact, when I first heard the voice, I mistakenly thought it was Linda Young, but Juanita Jennings was excellent. So I don't necessarily think the English version is all that bad. One thing that I do commend about it is that they actually did go to the extra effort of translating the songs, except of course for the hula dance scene, which, by the way, the songs in this movie were honestly really good. That goes for both the English and Japanese versions, especially the celebration song when Scarlet sees the future. I know I already mentioned that earlier, but I had to mention it again because I just thought the music was one of the highlights. One more thing that I sort of want to mention without giving too much away would have to be the ending. The whole movie deals with forgiveness, and they bait you into thinking that one thing is going to happen, and I was so worried that it was going to go down that same predictable route that these revenge stories often take, which it keeps on making you think that it will, but then it completely psychs you out at the very end, and that's what I love about it. So I'm not going to be too harsh on this film. I think it does bring a lot of clever ideas to the table. I would say it takes a while to get used to a lot of the creative decisions, especially during the first portion of the movie, but after that is when it really starts to pick up. It definitely is rough around the edges, but in the end, it does leave you feeling bittersweet, and I mean that in the nicest of ways. Not everyone is going to appreciate something like this, and not every film needs to be perfect to be enjoyable, but I did enjoy Scarlet, despite its flaws. I'm going to give the movie a 7 out of 10. I definitely will be watching it again in the near future because I do think there is a lot to appreciate about it. But does Scarlet live up to the hype? I'm having a hard time deciding on that, so I'll leave that up to you. Feel free to let me know what your opinions are on the movie. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, take care everyone.